Welcome to yet another very exciting edition of Sports Extraordinary Weekend Edition here on Atlantic Television Network. This weekend is a special weekend, no doubt. The African Cup of Nations has entered into the final stage. Semi-finalists have already emerged, and we'll see where to go from this stage of the competition. That will be a focus for discussion. Finalists, semi-finalists at the 2025 African Cup of Nations. Beyond that, we'll take a look at some local stories. Yes, the 2028 Nuga Games is to be hosted here in Nigeria. We'll look at how preparations are for the Nuga Games. In basketball, Gianni Antetokounmpo makes it very big at the last minute, I say, of the match between Milwaukee Bucks and LA Lakers. And of course, Gianni Antetokounmpo, you know, coming up against LeBron James, legendary LeBron James, but he was able to stop James twice in that fixture that went the way of the Bucks from Milwaukee. So a lot to talk about on this edition of Sports Extraordinary Weekend Edition. When we return from a break, I'll reveal to you my guest, and of course, we'll get started with so much fun this weekend. Welcome back. A Sports Extraordinary Weekend Edition. This weekend, we are looking at the African Cup of Nations ongoing in Morocco. 6 cities have offered so much fun, and we'll look at how some of the teams have already qualified to the semi-final stage of the competition. We'll look at the teams that have gone home. We'll see whether there's been any big fish headbound after hostilities in the competition. With me this weekend is Kingsley. Kingsley, it's nice to have you back after having honored your mother.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really happy, of course, to be back here to, of course, take a look at the African Cup of Nations once again. Nice to be here, Mr. Siri.
Well, the 35th edition of the African Cup of Nations is here, but before we look at that, mainly, let's look at one or two stories on the local scene. The Nuga Games is almost here. What do you look at it? What's your expectations from our provisions made for logistics and arrangement for the 2028 Nuga Games?
That's really my concern, because this time I think we heard it to be held at the ABU University down
Ahmadu Bello University.
Yeah, Ahmadu Bello University down there in Zaria, and I asked myself, do they really have what it takes, of course, to host this one? Because it's not just hosting it. You have to, of course, get the necessary facilities to make sure that the competition is really befitting at the end of the day. So we'll just keep our fingers crossed and see how this one, of course, will come up. I hear that the university are currently looking for sponsorship, agencies that could partner with them to make sure that they have a successful competition. So my concern is the fact that if they really have those facilities that will aid the game, of course, to be hosted properly. And I will talk about the Nuga game. Over the years, we've been looking at how these games could help churn out talent in the country, but it has not been the case for some time. But I just hope that maybe this time around there will be a change of narrative now that the National Sport Commission is now looking for talents that will possibly help the country, especially when we go out for global competition. I think this is an opportunity where we should look out for talent that could help us to put up a very impressive performance out there. Maybe we'll go for the Olympics or maybe any international competition. So we'll just keep our fingers crossed and see how this one, of course, will be hosted down there.
We'll see how it will be hosted. Talking about the Nuga Games at the Ahmadu Bello University in just about 24 months or so from now, preparations have to be really earnest. In the course of the week, we saw Anthony Joshua pay last respect to his friends that died in that ghastly accident a few days ago. Anthony Joshua, aftermath of that, do I say pay of respect to his colleagues? A lot of people have gone around town to say it looks like Anthony Joshua was going to call time on his boxing career. Do you, are you flowing along that line, Kingsley, or there is latest coming from his promoter?
Yeah, there's a latest coming from his promoter. Eddie Hearn has come out to say that people should refrain in talking about the career of Anthony Joshua. They should give the man time. He just lost, two of his best friends, and people are not talking about him to retire and all of that. And if you take a look at it, people should just, stop, talking about this guy, because at this point in time,
no, it's not just about people. It's his uncle that came to town, to say that they were considering retirement. And when the uncle of the boxer says that, a lot of people could think that, yes, that is coming from the inside of the family.
Yeah, that really came from the uncle. But I think at this point in time, Joshua should be given some space, to try to see how he can be emotionally free from what has happened to him. All right, this thing just happened 2 weeks ago, and people have started talking about, him to retire. I know it's going to really take a lot of time for him to bounce back, because emotionally he's not really stable, at this point in time. Eddie Hearn, of course, has come out to say that, people should just give him time. They shouldn't talk about, his career at this point in time. Joshua needed a lot of time, of course, to see how to recover before he bounced, of course, into the ring. And as it stands now, I think probably it might take him up to a year, for him to try to take out what has happened, of course, from his head, because losing such persons that are very close to you could be, couldn't really affect him, emotionally. So I think at this point in time, we should just give him space, let him clear his head, and see if, of course, he's going to bounce back to the ring, or maybe he's going to, call it a quit, in his boxing career. Joshua is 36 years. Before you know, I think if you look at it, age is not really by his side, and his boxing career is gradually winding down. Forward to bounce back this year and see how to take some, top fight. But what has happened at this point, and the man really needs time, of course, to clear his head. So let's just stick to what his promoter has said. They are in business, and they are there, of course, to make money. So talking about retirement at this point, I don't really see that, happening. But I think what Joshua just needs is for him to take out time to try to clear his head and see if he can bounce back to the ring.
Our condolences goes to Anthony Joshua's, of course, the families of the two of his friends and colleagues that passed on in course of that ghastly motor accident. But talking about boxing, reminds me that one man is in the news, former two-time Ultimate Fight Championship middleweight champion Israel Adesanya has ruled out his move to maybe from Ultimate Fight Championship to boxing. Is it? We've seen Jake Paul. Can he go the way of Jake Paul?
I don't really think so. If you look at it, we've seen fighters that have actually switched from UFC down to boxing. You ask yourself, how well have they fared when it comes to switching from UFC to boxing? It's a different ball game entirely. In the game of UFC, you use your hand, your leg, almost all your body. But in boxing, you make use of mostly your hands. So you switching, you actually need time, of course, to adapt. So saw that happen to Francis Ngannou, all right, where he actually switched from UFC down to boxing. He faced Tyson Fury, had a very good time against Tyson Fury, but against Joshua, where he was actually being knocked down, I think in the second or third round of that encounter. So it's not always easy for UFC fighters to switch into boxing, all right, to see how to put up something huge. We understand the money in boxing is actually huge than what, of course, they get there in UFC. But I think for Israel Adesanya, he's made a lot of money for himself. I don't think money will be an attractive factor for him at this point. He has come out to say that he's going to, of course, retire in UFC. No need of switching down to boxing, because what if he switches and then it's actually not a good one for him, at the end of the day. So as a UFC fighter switching to boxing, you need a lot of time, to adapt, to the techniques, in boxing before you can maybe start contending, as it stands. So for me, I think Adesanya is even thinking in that direction. He has come out to say that he would definitely, of course, end fighter. What we're just looking forward to see Adesanya because he's been away from the ring for about 2 years now, since he was, of course, beating back to back, as he stands. So we'll just look forward to see if he will come back and try, of course, to position things before, of course, he call it a quits in his UFC career.
Well, we just wish him the very best of luck in his taking of that let's say pre-retirement and retirement decisions, because it doesn't come too easy. Having been in the limelight for too long, and now is at the, let's say, the twilight of his career. We'll get to our main discussion, but just that I'm more pressed to look at the Australian Open that is here with us in the next couple of days. But before that, we'll just introduce our main discussion for today. Kingsley, the African Cup of Nations is into the semi-final stage. Just teams have qualified for the semi-final stage of the African Cup of Nations this weekend. But just before we look at the qualifiers for the semi-final, let's look at the teams that have so far crashed out of the competition. Do we have any big name that have crashed out of the competition so far?
Yeah, there are a lot of big names that have crashed out of the competition.
Really?
One is Tunisia. Of course, they're a big side, especially when you take a look at how they qualified, down, to the competition, and then you talk about, their performance as well, of course, in the group stage. So you could actually, of course, tag them as one of the huge side, that have crashed out, in the competition. If you take a look at it, everyone thought maybe Tunisia were really going to go very far in this competition, especially when you take a look at their impressive run. The competition as it is, and it's something, of course, we will look at for at this point in time. But there are other big names, still remaining, and I think it's really something huge, at this point.
Well, talk about names that have crashed out of the competition. For me, yes, like you mentioned, Tunisia. They are ranked 41 in the world, and they are going to the FIFA World Cup.
Yes, going to the FIFA World Cup. And also the team, of course, to crash out of the competition, then, of course, you could see how intense, of course, the competition is. If you take a look at it, the teams that qualify to the quarterfinal of the competition are all ranked, top 10. So the intensity in this African Cup of Nations is very, very huge, at this point in time. So if you don't hold your own very well, you might be eliminated, from the competition, and that's what, of course, we've seen so far.
Talking about a team going to the FIFA World Cup that has been eliminated from the competition, we talked about Tunisia. There is South Africa as well. Is it a big name surprise for you that they have crashed out of the AFCON 2025?
They're a big side. Last time they went down to the semi-final of the competition. So for them to be crashed out of the competition, or for them to, of course, be eliminated, I think is another thing to actually be concerned about. Because if the best we have, or maybe the teams going down to the World Cup are being eliminated from the competition, then it calls for worry. It calls for worry for Africa, because if our best cannot even get up to the quarterfinal of the African Cup of Nations, it calls for concern. You ask yourself, how far would they go in the FIFA World Cup that's even much intense, at this point in time? So I think it calls for worry that, South Africa, of course, couldn't make it to the quarterfinal of the competition.
Okay, let's look at one other big name. Yes, not going to the FIFA World Cup, but by African football standard, Cameroon is a fearsome side. They are out of the competition so far. A lot of people believe that they were going to make up for their not qualifying for the FIFA World Cup, by staying in the competition up to at least the semi-final stage of the competition. But now they have crashed out of the competition. Cameroon, Nigeria not going to the World Cup. Yeah. So the two teams, the feelers had been like, we'll make a statement at the African Cup of Nations. And now the Indomitable Lions of Cameroon they can't row.
Of course, can't row, and was a very, not a very spectacular performance from them against, Morocco yesterday. They were toothless, in that encounter. Couldn't actually create most of those chances that were needed, to score a goal. I think for about the second half of that game, they struggled to register a shot on target, in that particular encounter. The Moroccans were not that fantastic, in that encounter against Morocco, and was so disappointing. They conceded 2 goals, and that was not, of course, a very high mentality to say heading down to that particular one. But if you take a look at it, I think they tried, but their best, of course, was not good enough. Yes, they had a good time maybe in the group stage, but heading down to the knockouts, and then you talk about the quarterfinal. I think their best, of course, was not good enough, and they were highly motivated, despite the fact that they were even motivated financially. I think that, of course, couldn't even help them, at the end of the day. And even having a federation president in the person of Samuel Eto'o, who actually, of course, wants us success by all means, but at the end of the day, they couldn't, of course, surpass Morocco in that one. So unfortunate, of course, for Cameroon. If you look at it, football down there in Cameroon has really gone down. They've been struggling. I think it's even now they're even trying to put themselves, of course, in order to see how they can challenge, for something. It's been so abysmal for them when it comes to in the African Cup of Nations for the last 2 years.
Having looked at the big names that have disappointed so far at the African Cup of Nations, just talk about Tunisia, I'll talk about the Indomitable Lions of Cameroon. Do you think the Gabonese should be part of it? Because looking at their performance so far, if in the past, in the African Cup of Nations, you think they should make a list. But they lost all 3 of their fixtures, and it's been like everything they have worked for in the past been washed off by the Azingo Stars we saw at the last nation.
For me, I don't see Gabon to still be a big side, in the African Cup of Nations, because their performance has really watered down. I've not really seen them putting up that impressive, feats again, when it comes to African football. Yes, they have one of their key man, Aubameyang, but age not really by his side. He has not been given, of course, his best. And if you take a look at it, they had a very, very abysmal performance in the group stage. Couldn't even register, at the end of the day. And after that, the federation have to disband the team, all right? Have to suspend, most of the players. So you could see how bad, it has been, of course, for Gabon. So with that, I'm not really seeing them to be a big side anymore, of course, when it comes to African football at this time. Their football has really watered down. I think they really have a place when it comes to the big guys in African football.
Meanwhile, we're still reviewing the performances so far of the African Cup of Nations that we are into the semi-final stage this weekend. We're looking at teams, those who have crashed out, who are still in the competition. There are some teams that approach this year's African Cup of Nations, with the belief that yes, they were going to improve on their performances. Some have never won before. Mozambique, Botswana, Benin Republic. Will you review how these teams have performed? Did they meet up their target of at least winning a match or at least ending a point where possible?
I think Benin Republic tried. They were able to get a draw, I think, in one of the games they played, in their group, which they've never gotten before, So Benin tried. I think with General, of course, that's helped, of course, to improve the side. So far, so good. You could see football improvement in Benin Republic since General, of course, came in. That's to tell you that Raw really understands, African football. He knows how to put players together, to get the best. So what they did in the African and the World Cup qualifiers, where they almost qualified, to the World Cup, if not because of the impressive performance we saw from the likes of South Africa and the Super Eagles of Nigeria. Benin Republic would have actually qualified for the World Cup. So far, so good. If you take a look at this team, the likes of Botswana, Uganda, we talk about Tanzania and even Benin Republic. I think Benin had a very good time, in the competition. So I think for me,
Equatorial Guinea?
Equatorial Guinea? Yeah, I think they also tried. They also had a very good time as well, in the group stage of the competition. But still yet, could not really, prove themselves, once again, in that group. But as for me, I think Benin was really outstanding for me in terms of, these teams that, of course, have not really gotten a very good time in the African Cup of Nations.
Botswana were able to draw a match?
Yeah, I think they were also able to draw a match, but they also struggled. They had a little bit of, struggle, in their own group, and take once was not even top. That was a game I even expected them, maybe to have taken all 3 points, but they failed, as it stands. So we don't look forward to see what comes up. I think these teams, continue trying. Maybe one day they can, of course, put up a very impressive performance.
African Cup of Nations ongoing in Morocco is into the semi-final stage. We look at the teams that have qualified far and those who have already gone home and making arrangement. We look at some other, tidbits around the African Cup of Nations as well. For the Super Eagles of Nigeria, wow, it can't stop. Controversy around the team. Always, at every competition, it looks like there was always going to be the ugly head of lack of payment or bonuses meant for the players in the competition. It has, again, reared its ugly head. Will it affect Super Eagles' performances leading up to the semi-final? Well, when we return from the break, I think Kingsley will answer that question because it's looking currency nowadays that Nigeria, both male and female teams, in fact, any international team will always suffer from the issue of bonus crisis. When we return from the break, we'll look at the bonus crisis affecting the Super Eagles of Nigeria at the African Cup of Nations. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's Sports Extraordinary Weekend Edition here on Atlantic Television Network. And this weekend, it's been the focus has been on the African Cup of Nations, where teams are struggling to see which of them gets the diadem. And of course, nearly 10 million US dollars that is at stake. A lot of money, I must tell you. We'll just get to that aspect of the financial aspect of it in a short while, but then I see here with me Kingsley. Kingsley, just before we look at the African Cup of Nations, that of course we know that it's in the semi-final stage now, and we'll look at the dilemma of the Super Eagles of Nigeria. Yes, awful times they are into the Nations Cup or any in the competition. We hear before the competition gets to midway, you always hear a story of money is not being paid, allowances being owed, salaries owed. In fact, it's always time to hear one, ugly side of teams, and this is not any exception. The team in Morocco is not any exception from it. But before that, let's look at some tennis stories. The Australian Open, the biggest, do I say the very first Grand Slam of the year, is almost here with us. In another 10 days or so, we'll have the Australian Open. Are the top tennis players ready for this one?
I think they're very much ready for this one. When you take a look at their preparation in some of the mini tournaments, we've seen just recently we saw Arina Sabalenka, after the exhibition game against Nikiro, she's in the final of the Brisbane, Open, assistant. So you could see that some of these players are getting very much ready. The likes of Coco Gauff, Naomi Osaka, and the rest of them, they've been participating in one or two tournaments to make sure, of course, they get themselves ready for the Australian Open. I think Arina Sabalenka is actually going for a third Australian Open title, and if you take a look at it, she's been very, very much, prepared. She's been putting up a lot of preparation, for this one. So if you look at it, I think most of the players are really getting ready. In the male category, Yannick Sinner,
Carlos Alcaraz, you talk about Djokovic, Zverev, Medvedev. They are the image of the game. They are the image of the tournament. Without these players, some of these fans will not troop in to pay ticket fee, of course, to come to the Australian Open. They are the one who sell the tournaments. So their image alone, very huge one, in terms of promoting or branding the tournament at this point in time. So for me, I think the organizer should look into it. If the players are asking for more, then they should look at it and see how to compensate them very well. Because without these players, the tournament will not be what it is, at this point in time. If Arina Sabalenka is coming, if Yannick Sinner is coming, Carlos Alcaraz is coming, they're coming with their fans. Some persons want to travel all the way from Spain to Australia to watch Carlos Alcaraz. Some want to travel all the way from Italy to come watch Yannick Sinner, of course, in Australia. So for me, I think if you look at it, these players generate the money. And at this point in time, if they're asking for more, they should be considered.
Well, the tennis players around the world are best of their asking for increase in their remunerations, aftermath of their sweats on the courts all around. There are 4 Grand Slam of the year. The very first gets started in Australia in the next few days from now. Wish them the very best, like Kingsley did allude there. The top players are doing their very best, especially the world number 1, Arina Sabalenka, and of course, in the male category, It looks like the guys are looking better.
Yeah, really looking better. Yannick Sinner and Carlos Zakaras, of course, they're still ready for their competition once again. They say you understand how last season was for them. It was a huge battle.
Two of them they shared all the Grand Slams.
Yeah,
two apiece.
Yes, they shared all the Grand Slam, and at the end of the day, of course, it was still Yannick Sinner who finished the season as world #1. And I think
that must be a really serious effort. Yannick Sinner, if you remember, was out at the beginning of the season, for some reasons.
Yeah. I think about it was Carlos Zakaras that finished world #1. Yes. I think it would have been Yannick Sinner if maybe he didn't go for that 3 months ban. So you take a look at it this season, looking at everything being fresh and okay for him. I think he has a whole lot, of course, to prove this time. And for me, Akara should just watch it because the competition is really, really going to be very tough this season.
Wow, let's get back to the African Cup of Nations. And Morocco, the host nation, seems to be getting it all right up to this stage. They are into the semi-finals now. Is this team the real deal?
We'll give my fingers crossed and see what comes today in the semi-final already. And so far, so good. I think they've not done badly. Yesterday, we saw how they really pressed. Cameroon, of course, didn't really find a very good chance, like I mentioned, in the second half of that game. They couldn't even register a shot on target. That was how formidable, Morocco was, in that encounter. And I don't know how to put it now, but somehow I think the officiating really favored, Morocco in that encounter. There were some calls that, of course, that were supposed to favor Cameroon, but the center referee didn't, of course, give a listening ear. So if you look at it yesterday, somehow just like Morocco were favored in terms of the officiating. But aside from that, Morocco had a good performance, last night, against Cameroon. So if you look at it, a good side now in the semi-final of the competition, waiting to face, either Nigeria or Algeria at this point in time. So if you look at it, Morocco, they've been formidable and they have what it takes to go into the final of this particular. Looking at what, of course, we've seen at this point in time, their next opponent is either going to be Nigeria or Algeria, and I think those are opponents that they can, of course, confront and possibly get a good, performance.
Semi-finalists so far this year's African Cup of Nations looks like semi-finalists of Lions, Atlas Lions of Morocco into the semi-final, and then the Teranga Lions of Senegal as well is into the semi-final. They did that at the expense of Mali, the Eagles of Mali. Do we have quality in this Senegalese side at the African Cup of Nations?
Of course. They're a very formidable side. They have Sadio Mane, down there. Ndiaye, one man, of course, who actually have been very fantastic. He actually scored that long goal that, of course, they use in eliminating, talking about, Mali yesterday. So I think if you look at it, they have those players that can, of course, get the job done, and that's why they've been very fantastic. Talking about Senegal, they've been unbeaten in their last 15 AFCON matches. So you can see how formidable they are getting down to this stage of the competition. I think Senegal should be the teams remaining, of course, should be very careful of them, because if you look at what they did, of course, against, Mali. Mali, if not because of Tesuki, yes, they were one man down in that game. Maybe they would have come back, but Senegal, they still hold their own down to the last minutes of that game. So I think for Senegal, they have qualities that they have quality players, and of course, get the job done for them in the AFCON.
Let's wrap up our focus on the African Cup of Nations with disturbing stories coming from the camp of the Super Eagles of Nigeria. Once again, the players have had to go on strike after qualifying for the quarterfinal stage of the competition. Reason? They have been owed bonuses of all the matches they have played so far at the African Cup of Nations. They played 4 games. No money have been paid to the players. It has been so messy to the point that the players refuse to travel to their next venue of the, their next quarterfinal venue at the ongoing Nations Cup. From first, they were supposed to go to Marrakesh in Morocco, but they refused. In fact, they stayed for more than a day at first, refusing to move to Marrakesh. Kingsley, this is like a recurring decimal. Every international sports meet involving Nigerian team, there will always be complaint of bonuses. this is so messy to the point that the captain of the Super Eagles, Wilfred Ndidi, has offered to pay the bonuses to the players just for the players to concentrate, move to the next venue of their, just say, a quarter-final clash. Do you see us removing this ghost of not paying players or athletes going for meets for Nigeria as when due?
I think it's actually a very difficult one, because if you look at it, I think the Nigerian Football Federation, they've been very, very incompetent. They show high level of incompetency, all right? And for me, I don't know when they will start, putting things right, because this is, incompetency. How will you prepare a team for the African Cup of Nations and you've not prepared their match bonuses? You expect them to play after playing, you start telling them stories. I don't know. I don't know how they do things over there. Because for me, I think if you look at it, you know that you're going to play the African Cup of Nations. So whatever it takes, that of course will avoid any unnecessary issues, you should be able to have put them in place after playing the group stage game, because the players know. The thing is, the players have lost interest on the Nigerian Football Federation. That's why they decided they're not going to travel to Marrakesh, because they know that if they travel, go play the game against Algeria and they win, they will clap for them. Also, let's get to the final. And after the game, they'll say, okay, no problem, we'll send the money. And the money will never come. We saw this happen in the World Cup qualifiers. I think when they wanted to play against, Gabon. Now it's repeating itself again. The players have now learned. They've now learned their lesson, because this is what has been happening, to them for a very long time. That's why they are now saying, we will not travel, we will not do this if you don't pay us the match bonuses. And I think for me, the Nigerian Football Federation should be ashamed of themselves, because if at the end of the day the players do not have trust in them and they are very incompetent in terms of delivering when it's needed, it means they're not doing anything. Ibrahim Gusso, of course, I don't know what he's doing, because at the end of the day, it generates money. It is bad that it is the National Sport Commission that is in charge of paying the coach of the Super Eagles, Eric Chell, for some time now. You ask yourself, what is the Nigerian Football Federation doing? Is that not supposed to be their responsibility, at the end? For match bonus, it is also the federal government that still pays. So what is the government of Ibrahim Musa Gusau really doing in Nigerian football? It's a very big question that we must ask, that every time we hear issues like this, and at the end of the day, when the players do not perform well or the coach do not win the game, you put the blame on them. All right? So for me, I think it's very, very bad. I just hope that maybe after this African Cup of Nations, they will come back, sit together and see how to iron things out, so that things like this. You ask yourself, out of the 24 countries participating in this African Cup of Nations, how many of the players have come out to say we are being owed match bonuses? It's only Nigeria. So it is very, very disheartening at this point in time. I just hope that the boys will just put all of this distraction aside and try to win the game against Algeria, at least for the glory of the nation, as well, to maybe satisfy the minds of Nigerians who are really anticipating this particular one.
How do you reconcile the fact that qualifying for the quarterfinal stage of the competition, the Super Eagles players or the team earn as much as 2.1 billion naira for their effort? This inclusive of 10,000 US dollar per goal, and of course FIFA money approved for qualification for the stage of money. Because CAF is actually responsible for organizing the African Cup of Nations.
Yeah.
So at least the team is rich to the tune of 2.1 billion.
But it's not enough reason they shouldn't be paid their bonuses now. It's not enough. That is what they've worked for. That's what they worked for. So you shouldn't deprive them of their match bonuses, because CAF is going to give them this, and all of that.
No, not really. Yes, CAF is going to give them a qualification bonus.
Yeah.
There's going to be, like I mentioned, a private businessman putting up 10,000 US dollar for every goal scored in the competition.
They work for it. They work for it, all right? So they merit it. So you should not deprive them of the one. They know that this one is primary, this one is basic, at this point in time. So I think it's not justifiable. The NFF should pay them their money. It's even embarrassing that the captain is coming out to say, oh, I will take care of the responsibility. These are things that happen. Just like the other time, Mikel Obi was coming out to say, I paid for this, I paid for that. And there was a lot of issues. And now this is Wilfred Ndidi. Who knows what will happen tomorrow? And I think it's then time NFL should try most kind to take all of this, so that we do not see things like this happening, or sometimes embarrassment coming, said, for some of the players coming to say, well, I paid so thing during this time, and the Nigerian Football Federation didn't pay me back. Just like what happened between Mikel Obi and Samson Siasa, some time ago. So for me, whatever they are getting, they should get. The Nigerian Football Federation, they should pay their mad bonuses.
Super Eagles of Nigeria, they are already at a very crucial stage of the competition, and I think they deserve to earn their money. Let's quickly go to Europe now because we seem to be running out of time, Kisley. Looking at Europe, this is the first weekend in European football, and the Premiership in England seems to take the focus of the other top leagues. But then first, let's look at latest happening in the Premiership in England. Arsenal, after all, are just say 6 points leaders in the Premiership over Manchester City.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are beginning to think that it could be Arsenal's year, given that Manchester City dropped 6 points in 3 consecutive games. That's the drew 3 matches consecutively.
Yes, I think if you look at it, it looks like it's Arsenal season, but it actually have to be very much intentional. They would have possibly make it about, I think, 8 points if they have gotten that win against Liverpool, but they let that one slide. So they should be more intentional in terms of the title race. City, yes, they are just 6 points behind. 6 points is not a huge one. In 2 games, you can close up that gap, or 3 games, to say. So Arsenal really have to be much intentional if they want to win the title, because City, just that 6 points is not enough. At this point, if they have maybe won that game against Liverpool, I think that would have given them more strength in terms of fighting. But just 6 points, it is still very scary.
You need 1 point to win the Premier League, and I've heard stories people say, well, but then you need just a point to win the league, and so you don't win the league in January. You win the league at least after April, and so they have to keep fighting. But if you fight from a 6 point advantage, that's quite a lot, in my own opinion. And so I really don't join those who think that it should be 100 points gap between them and the second place team to win the league. No, if you want to win the league, then you can win. You win the league on the last day, not before the last day. We've seen Arsenal before throw away 13-point lead. 13, yes.
So
I remember.
If they have thrown away,
yeah. So that's what I'm saying. It's not about the number of points you keep. The points difference. For Chelsea, they were on the losing side.
Yeah, I just wish Liam Rossini the very best, because if you take a look at Chelsea now, it's not after what the owners want. It's not what the manager wants at this point. The owner decide 100% of what happened in the team. Yes, we understand.
That's why they call him a yes man, Liam, the new coach. He will agree with what the owner says.
Yeah,
but of course, he who pays the piper dictates the tune.
Yeah, I just hope that it doesn't get toxic for him. It doesn't get to a point where he's now finding it difficult to follow up everything the owners have said, at this point. Just like what happened to Enzo Maresca. Enzo Maresca agreed. He signed everything they told him. But at the end of the day, he find it difficult to cope. So I just hope that the guest man will continue to answer yes till he achieved everything he wants to achieve down there at Chelsea Football Club.
How do you say something about the Premier League without talking about Manchester City? They are into the January transfer window.
Yeah.
And right now they've signed Semedo.
Yeah, Semedo.
And that's quite a lot of money. In addition to the over 2 billion spent by Pep Guardiola in the transfers. A lot of people are saying Pep Guardiola may not be in charge next season, but then he has spent so much money, and in fact, some believe that he has bought titles. But this is one man who wins everywhere he goes.
I will not buy into that idea that he bought titles.
Because big names, he spent so much money, and that's why people say that the money spent, and that's what gives him the title, not really because of.
But he bought players that play to bring him the titles.
At what cost? That's what you are saying. Yes.
Yeah. But the thing is, sometimes in football, you need money if you want to stand out. The big teams out there, they spend a lot. Take a look at Paris Saint-Germain, all right? So the thing is, Pep is the kind of manager that whenever he gets to a team, he needs that resources, of course, to be able to get those players that will do the job for him. He came into Manchester City And of course, if you look at it, for the space of time he has spent in the team, he has delivered up to 5 Premier League titles, about 5 Premier League titles to see, and he won them the UEFA Champions League. What has Pep not really won? What has he not won in Manchester City? So if you look at it, the money he has spent, I think he has been able to deliver those titles that City, of course, were looking at.
Champions League, the Champions Premier League.
Mikel Arteta has spent up to $1 billion, you know, up to $1 billion. But how many trophies has he won? So that's the thing. So, so the thing is, when you spend, are you delivering? Are the results coming? So that's it for me.
And you think that has been fired in Manchester United?
I think so. United, of course, somehow they've been trying to dodge away from spending, you know, this time around. They've not only been doling out the money due to, I think, some administrative issues and all of that. For Amorim, even him himself, of course, finding it difficult to be able to stabilize the team. For the case of United, I don't think it was as a result of maybe spending, because the team, of course, was not really in a good, you know, setup. So even though you spend, you still need time, you know, for this, of course, you know, for the players, you know, to adapt. It's one thing to spend, it's another thing for the manager to utilize the money and utilize the players to generate results, you know, as it stands. Recently, Liverpool spent over £400 million, but Ancelotti is finding it difficult, of course, to utilize those players to bring out results. So for Pep, for spending over $2 billion and still be able to deliver trophies for the team,
well, let's get across to your other part of Europe and Spain. Barcelona still holding it tight, you know, in the Spanish La Liga, and of course, the other tournaments out there is still Real Madrid trying to play catch up.
Yeah, I think it's been a very tough one in the Spanish La Liga. If you want to take a look at it, it's been Barcelona, Real Madrid trying to push it up. I think we're going to experience the Force Clasico
this weekend.
In the Spanish Super Cup, where Barcelona, of course, will lock horns against Real Madrid. Another moment to look at, you know, what Spanish football, of course, will bring to the table once again.
Well, the rivalry between these two clubs has continued this weekend. In fact, on Monday, I think. We'll get that result for you, and of course what has happened. But then FC Barcelona, of course, showing that yes, they have invested well, if you ask me, because the young players are all coming to the party.
Yeah, I think they're doing their job very well. The man, of course, who left Manchester United to that side, talking about Marcus Rashford, they are about to sign him permanently because of his impressive performance, you know, so far. I think if you look at it, Barcelona are not leaving any stone unturned. Try most kind, of course, to, you know, invest on their players and make sure that they are very ready, you know, for this season. I think currently they are also looking out, you know, for a top striker, looking at the fact that their striker, Robert Lewandowski, might be leaving anytime. So they're looking for possible replacements, you know, at this point in time. So we'll just see what the season, you know, hold for them. But so far, so good. I think for me, in the Spanish La Liga, it's been an impressive ride for FC Barcelona.
Well, we can look at what has happened in Spain, in France and Germany, but that will be next week because we're running out of time now. We just have to begin to wrap up the show, and there's no way we can end the show without bringing to you our Sports Extraordinaire for this weekend, where the African Cup of Nations has entered into the semi-final stage of the competition. The name on the lips of every football follower since the one of this year's African Cup of Nations has been Brahim Diaz. Brahim Diaz, yes, the man you see on your screen there. He plays his professional football for Real Madrid in Spain. And every match he has played so far this year's African Cup of Nations has resulted to 1 goal coming off his boot. 5 goals. No other player has been consistent back to back, 5 matches, 5 goals in the history of African Cup of Nations. Brahim Diaz, Real Madrid, your Sports Extraordinaire for this weekend, Kingsley?
Very, very deserving. I think the young man has been very, very impressive, scoring in all the games he has played in the 2025 African Cup.
He has 2 more games to play. Maybe he will just score 7 goals.
Definitely, and possibly might just be the highest goal scorer, you know, of the tournament. You know, at the end of the day, I think it's going to be thing we're seeing him putting up such an impressive performance. Morocco are very lucky, of course, you know, to have him, because I think he's a huge strength, you know, to them in the tournament.
Brahim Diaz, Real Madrid playmaker, you know, doing his best for his country, and he is our Sports Extraordinaire for this weekend. Congratulations. We just hope that by the time we return next weekend, he could have scored more goals for Morocco, and maybe we'll keep our fingers crossed on which team will emerge as champion of this year's African Cup of Nations. But Ibrahim Diaz and his team are the host nation. Are they hosting to win? When we return next weekend, we'll answer that question. Until then, remember, peace and unity are clearly pathways to progress. Always enjoy here on Atlantic Television Network.